Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. I'm a little bit off balance because I waited until the last minute to come up with a title and then couldn't come up with a good one, so we got stuck with one, and then it was like 5 minutes to stream. Steve Nigerian is raiding. I'm not even ready. What's up, everybody? Hello. Welcome in. Steve Nigerian. Get ready. Yeah, I just popped in. I had the day off and somehow I was late to my own stream. That's that's just sort of how the day is going. Let me say hello to everybody. What up, Prof? How's it going, my friend? Matt, welcome in. Tuna, thank you so much for the continued subscription support. You're a good man, Tuna. I am the well-known slave revolt leader who should crucify for. Well, I don't think we're going to be crucifying anybody tonight. Hello to my lovely wife. Hello to Steve Nigerian and all of his friends. And hello to everybody else in the room. Sounds like my favorite game I like to play. That's why you're late for my stream today. Yeah, you know. I did the I prepped this stuff this morning, and I really didn't need to prep too much. It only took me like 20 minutes to get this stuff together because this is something that I talk about a lot when I teach World Civ. And I guess I just thought like, oh, I'm done, and I literally didn't think of coming up with a pun until I sat down about 20 minutes ago to turn everything on and get everything set up, and then I realized, oh stink! I've got no title. What's up, Noger? So in the process of that, I had to try to slam together something. One of my light bulbs is having a moment up here. What are you doing, buddy? You gonna make it? You gonna be okay? You gonna be okay? Alright. Do your thing. But yeah, I had the day off today because of cold weather. So I sat and did very little. It took about an hour and a half for Assassin's Creed Valhalla to load all of the updates and junk so that I could play it for about 45 minutes this afternoon. I'm watching Secession, this show that everybody just is raving about. It won all kinds of Emmy Awards and Critics' Choice Awards and Golden Globe Awards and SAG Awards. And I'm still not sure exactly what the premise of the show is. I don't get why everybody likes it. Is it just... I don't know, maybe the show just represents we all knew that those rich people were horrible and they're proving it. It's very talky, and I don't have a problem with that, but sometimes it talks too much, right? The Trump family meets the Murdochs in a dark comedy setting. Yeah, I mean, some of it's funny, but some of it's funny because it's just like sad, right? Like if a regular human did that, they didn't have billions of dollars, they'd go to jail. I don't know. I mean, it's not bad, but I've definitely been watching it in the background of doing other things, so it's okay. Some of the acting is good, and some of the writing is interesting, but I don't know. I'm not going to go into all of it. But anyway, it's an okay show. I just don't get the hype. There's so much hype. I think it might be like Hollywood hype, but I don't know. Anyway, So what else did I do today? Yeah, that's about it, really. Consoled a puppy who is freezing. She does not like the cold weather at all. She is wearing the puppy sweater, so if she shows up on stream tonight, you all will get to see the puppy sweater. So, I'm 8 episodes into season 2. So I'm almost done with season 2. What up, Green Herring? How's it going? Yeah, so I was supposed to be at work today, and the cold weather shut everything down. So I posted some online assignments for my students to do. Hopefully they saw that and did that, but we'll see. It's not, see, like, I don't think it's that bad. Brittany does not like the cold weather. And the area around me doesn't respond well to cold weather. And to be fair, part of that is because we're not prepared for this kind of stuff. We don't have tire chains. We don't have salty distributors. We don't have snow plows, that kind of stuff. So we don't have the infrastructure that's really in place to handle having an overnight rain and then an immediate freeze and half an inch of ice on everything. We're not equipped for that kind of stuff. It's a fairly rare occurrence. It's only really happened maybe twice in the last 5 or 6 years. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense for local municipalities to prepare for that kind of stuff fiscally. So, we get what we get, right? Yeah, and it was 70s where you are. So you live in the, in the comfortable world where it's spring or, fall year round, but you also pay crazy taxes. So buckle up, right? Yeah, I mean, you just drive slow and don't... Anyway, there's that. Let's talk about imperialism, right? So this is a viewer request stream. This is Adventures in History. I didn't really introduce myself when the raid came in, but I have a feeling that if you were hanging out in Steven's chat, you probably got the pitch about who I am, and there's a fairly good chance that you've been in before. So, Steven, take it easy. I don't know if you're still out or what's your sports ball team. Well, at least your sports ball team wins sometimes. Mine doesn't win very much at all. What up, Cave? Tuna's new here. That's sure. That's fine. We talk about history, but we do it in a way that's kind of laid back. And, we kind of have a bit of a chat about things, and we'll go off on tangents, and we'll try to make fun out of some of this stuff. I like this stuff a lot. I teach the Opium Wars quite a bit. I was actually talking with my wife earlier today about some of the pitfalls of teaching World Civ in one semester. You get World Civ 2, which is supposed to be everything from the year 1500 to now. And that's a lot. You've heard me decry the horrors of trying to teach World Civ 1, which is basically everything from the beginning of human existence until 1500, which is crazy. There's just no way to do it. But in the modern world, you sort of have to boil everything down to these case studies, right? And when I'm talking about Asian colonization, specifically European colonization of Asia, I really only get 2 or 3 big case study examples of what that looked like. And I always use the Opium Wars, purely because they represent some of the most naked greed and ambition on behalf of the European powers, and also because I think it's some of the most atrocious stuff that gets not as much attention as I feel like it should, right? Danaus, how's it going? Welcome. So let's talk about the Opium Wars. And first off, what are we even dealing with? Here we have China, but what polities? Well, we're talking here about the Qing dynasty. So this is the Qing dynasty. at its extent, and this is in 1820, so this is right before a lot of the trouble stuff starts. So the dark yellow here is the territory that they control directly. The lighter yellow colors are territories that are under military occupation. So they are tributary to the Central Emperor. So they're not necessarily annexed part of the empire, but these are states that are under military occupation and pay tribute and do not have choice of their own independent ruling status. The emperor is going to pick somebody from their area to run all of this stuff. And then in the darker orange color here, we have additional states that are self-governing but tributary states, which basically means if you don't pay us every year, we're going to beat the crap out of you. So this is a big old territory. Now, a little bit about the Qing dynasty, because this is something, again, that doesn't get talked about a lot. Around this time, the Qing dynasty had the biggest population of any country on Earth, and it also had the biggest economy of any country on Earth. And it was, for all intents and purposes, self-sustaining. It did not really need to have external trade. It produced its own food. It produced its own trade goods, its own luxury items. It had a very, very stable government, and things were going pretty great. Now, all of that is going to play into the situation that we're dealing with. So, most notably, when we're talking about a country that is self-sufficient, it doesn't need external trade. The size of the Qing dynasty itself was so great that it didn't really need the Europeans' money. It didn't really need African money. It didn't really need other countries in Asia money, because it was just that strong. The Qing dynasty was not Han Chinese. They were ethnically Manchu, which is kind of something that the modern government of China doesn't like to recognize. The modern government of China loves to talk about this period of time because in the Chinese viewpoint, they point at this particular era as sort of the beginning of external imperial interference. This is sort of the period of time where the evil West gets its rise, and in a lot of ways I can't argue with that. There are plenty of things that are in the modern Chinese history curriculum that I could point at and say this is absolutely wrong, this is miscast, this is misinterpreted. This is actually something that I could get behind, because they want to talk about the European side of things and the interference side of things and the war side of things. They don't really want to talk very much about the fact that the Qing dynasty was not ethnically Han Chinese. They kind of brush that part under the rug. There's a lot of ethnic issue going on in modern day China, if you haven't figured that out already. But just because they don't need trade from Europe does not mean that there was no trade with Europe. What are the Manchu people ethnically? They're from Manchuria, which is sort of over in this region, which is part of modern day China. That question is probably an entire stream to itself, though. We can't go into the entire history of everything about them, but they had been incorporated into the Chinese sphere for a couple of hundred years at this point, and they were able to work their way up from originally being sort of lower level territorial governors along the boundaries to moving into the driver's seat of the empire itself through the course of internal weakness and marrying in the right direction and that kind of stuff. Interesting group of people. but a topic for a different day. Europe wanted to trade with China, though. And as far back as the 1680s or so, Europe had started sending ships to China specifically with the purpose of trying to open their territory up for trade. And that did not go over very well. Why was Denzel their candidate? That's a fair question. A decent movie. That's actually a remake. The one with Denzel is a remake. And based on a much more interesting book, believe it or not. But he actually wasn't the... Anyway, that's a whole... Okay, I see what you're doing here. I see what you're doing. Anyway, around 1700, the ruling dynasty of China is going to establish something that is pretty important to our overall structure here because it's going to be in place for most of our discussion, and this is called the Canton system. Now, what's up with this system? Well, the Imperial Chinese didn't need European trade. The Europeans were rather insistent, and the Imperial clan felt like this might be a way to, I don't know, get some neat stuff, basically. But they didn't want Europeans all over China, so they opened up a single port city, and this was the port city of Canton. And they said, okay, Europeans, if you want to trade with us, the only place that you can trade with us is in this city. And we will have designated zones where you can buy and sell your goods, but heads up, we are going to put in place certain strictures and rules that are going to benefit our merchants and discourage you from trading. Just to be point blank. The government claimed monopoly over all trade that was happening at Canton, and through this particular monopoly designated certain individuals with overseeing specific types of trade, and you could then only trade with those people. So if you wanted to trade, say, I don't know, spices from India, there was a Chinese government-held monopoly, and you would have to go speak with the individual that the Chinese government had designated to be the spice person, and you would have to trade with them at prices that they set and in the currency that they desired. And this was something that the British initially accepted because it was a way to get goods out of China, specifically porcelain and silk and tea. These are three things that the British just absolutely went gaga for. The rest of Europe was crazy for these particular items. But because the Chinese knew that, they stuck it to the British every way that they could. So the prices were inflated. The fees for trading and licensing were very, very high. And of course, if you ticked off the government monopoly holders, they could basically say, we're no longer going to trade with you anymore because we don't like you. You're going to have to go find somebody else to show up and buy and sell stuff from here. So this was set up around the year 1700. And for a while, things were going okay. For a couple of decades, things went more or less okay. But the demand for Chinese goods continuously increased, but the amount of trade didn't really keep up with that, and there's a specific reason for it. One of the things that was very evident to the British and other European traders was China didn't care about their stuff as much. Like, China just didn't care very much about European stuff. They didn't really need it. They didn't want food. They took some of the luxury items, some of the furniture, some of that kind of stuff, but it wasn't really their bag. So in most cases, the trade that was happening was Chinese goods for European silver. And that, for a little while, was going fine. But after a couple of decades of this, the European countries, especially Britain, France, and Portugal, are going to recognize that China's soaking up all of this European silver. And they're not really giving any of it back out. But this is where we get a little bit of an interesting situation here, because it's mostly corporations that are being run by governments that are doing all of the trading. So what's happening here is that the coffers of some of these countries, like Britain, were being emptied of specie, of silver currency, because they were giving all their silver to China, and China wasn't recirculating any of it back into the European market. And this actually starts causing monetary issues. This is going to potentially cause inflation. This is going to limit the amount of money that governments can spend. And especially Britain during the early 1700s, they've got a lot of stuff on their minds about, conquering and expanding and trade. And there are these big, global empires getting set up, and they're constantly playing this mercantile game where hard currency is sort of the name of the game to be the winner. You want this giant stockpile of gold and silver in your coffers, and you don't want anybody else to have any of it. But China was winning this like crazy, so much so that the imperial clan in China actually starts getting a little bit worried at how much silver they have. It's devaluing the silver inside China. But that's not as bad of a problem, because at that point the government could just sort of take some of it out of circulation and stick it in a vault and, limit the amount of currency. So they had much more option because of a surplus of money, as the Europeans did with a deficit of physical money. Well, what are we going to do at this point if you are the Europeans? The answer is try to trade more. So they send letters to the Emperor of China, and they try to get the imperial clan to open up more cities, and China says no. China was benefiting from this way more. They had a very comfortable, very good system. They didn't have to trade with Britain in the first place, right? There's no guaranteed right that you must trade with me. That just doesn't exist, right? One sovereign nation can't say you will trade with me regardless, unless we're talking about Europeans, because they did that all the time. This is a case study in what happens when a country tells Britain and the Europeans no. Enter opium. Now, opium had already been banned as a trade good for international trade by 1729 in China. So no Chinese merchant could trade with any European merchant for opium. China already had opium, but it wasn't refined opium. It was usually just sort of made into a tea, and it wasn't really used in a narcotic kind of way. It was used for things like pain killing, if you have a headache, or if you are going to have an amputation or something like that. So it had been in the larger Chinese medicinal toolkit for centuries, right? But it wasn't really the narcotic form that they were using. There was a small amount of opium grown in Chinese territory, especially out in the west part that they had, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. But by the time Britain gets into India, this is in the 1750s. In 1757, Britain takes over Bengal, which is this region over here in India, right around in here, right? So the answer to China buying up Western debt is to flood them with drugs. Frank Big Time, aloha. That's pretty much what is about to happen. Hyperinflation is a potential problem. You got to watch out for that, but it's not going to be something that's going to end up happening. Anyway, so Britain takes over Bengal. And as they take over Bengal, they are going to inherit or steal or colonize a really big opium production market, right? What's up, Lopta? So the Bengali people had already been producing opium in a much more refined way. This is the sort of modern opium production that we, might see in any sort of large-scale poppy plantation stuff. This is where you go out with your your thumb blade and you score along the edge of the poppy bulb, and this then leaks out sap that you then go back and scrape off and render and turn into opium, either powder or in a brick. But this is refined, highly concentrated, narcotic grade opium. So the geopolitical stepping stone for the Brits to reach China was India. Yes. And the proximity to China of Indian held territory by the British is going to give them literally a back door, because one of the ways that they start sneaking this in is through Tibet and the West here. But what's going to happen initially is trying to trade with mainland China through the Canton system. But again, opium trade directly was illegal. You could not, as a British merchant, float a ship full of opium up to the harbor in Canton and unload opium onto the docks and sell it to Chinese merchants. It was illegal for international opium trade to occur. So, what do? Well, if you're British, what you do is you get some of these really old ships that they have, because again, Britain had just tons and tons and tons of ships. It doesn't really matter if they're necessarily good for long journeys, because what you're going to do is you're going to float them up to the sort of edge of what we might call international waters, and you're going to anchor them, and you're going to turn some of these big old ships into floating opium warehouses. And your merchants are going to continue on to the coastline, and you're going to find Chinese merchants, and you're going to tell them, hey, we've got opium, it's just offshore. So if you come with us with your ships can sail out to where our warehouse ship is, and we'll do the trade out there in the middle of the ocean, and then you can float your Chinese ships back into harbor, and you can unload the opium, because at that point, it's your opium. And you, as a Chinese merchant, can sell opium to other Chinese people. But we just have to do the deal out at sea. So this is their loophole. And it works really, really well. It works really, really well. And in the span of about a decade, opium consumption in China is going to start skyrocketing. It doubles, and then it doubles again, and then it doubles. It's ridiculously fast growth. And this is going to require some intervention. The imperial government is going to get involved. And this guy, at the time, is going to be Emperor. This is Emperor Qianlong. These are such great portraits, by the way. The amount of detail in these paintings is just spectacular. This is how we end up with Hong Kong. That's after the end of the first one. We're getting there pretty quick. You want a floating opium warehouse? Well, decommission a ship of the line and fill the hole up with, chests fulls of opium. So, anyway, this is Emperor Qianlong, and he's ruling at the time. He rules from 735 to 790, or 1735 to 1796. He had been one of the initial people to tell the Europeans that they couldn't bring in opium, and he's going to start trying to curb opium use. And one of the things that he does is tries to turn this into a moral argument. And he's going to reach out to the people of China, and he's going to issue this edict that condemns the evils of opium and talks about how it's not good for you, it's addictive, this is not what our culture is about, this is not what our our ancestors would want or our religion would support. He dumps on it pretty hard. And it ends up having very little effect. Around this time, the Europeans are going to be bringing in opium by the chest. So they had these specific units of measure that were trade chests, and it's this big, humongous block that is about 140 pounds worth of opium. And for those of us not in the imperial system, that's about 64 kilos of opium. So this is the sort of standard usage weight of trade. And at the beginning of this period of time, in like the early 1700s, we're talking about maybe 50 or 60 chests worth of opium being sold every year, right? By the time that Qianlong is getting involved, making his decree that this is evil, that had already increased to almost 150. So it's already doubled just in the span of, one person's lifetime. And it's not slowing down basically at all. It gets pretty sideways pretty fast. So pretty nice. 140 quid or 140 pounds. So the 140 pounds is about 64 kilos of opium. Can I have a floating semiconductor warehouse? That's actually a much better investment at this point, and ironically another reason why China wants to take over Taiwan, because they're trying to corner the market on stuff like semiconductors, and Taiwan has a really big production capacity for computer parts and chip manufacturers and semiconductor stuff. So yeah. So this is by weight. Where did the Brits get the opium production from? They're getting it from conquering Bengal, India. And they're making it in India, and they're shipping it around to these floating warehouses in China to avoid the Canton system. Yeah, exactly, right. They make pretty much all of it. And China would love to have control of that, which is one reason why the West should really put their foot down and not let China do what Russia is doing to Ukraine, to Taiwan. Anyway, so Emperor says, this is bad. You shouldn't do opium. We should get rid of it. It's bad for us. It doesn't do very much. In fact, it has basically no impact, and opium only increases. Opium use continues to go up. So what about our next emperor? All right, so here's our next emperor. This is Jia Qing. And he is going to rule from 1796 to 1820. He decides that this is a big deal, and he wants to take it one step further. And Jia Qing is going to ban opium, period. This is, you can't buy it or sell it, and this is even banning it for sort of, medicinal use. You're just not supposed to have opium. You are not supposed to use opium. You're not supposed to have it, etc., etc. The ban has very little to no effect. It doesn't actually stop opium from coming into China. It just makes it go underground. They should have you try the DARE program instead, right? 1820 is not that long ago. It's not so long, right? So Jia Qing tries for his entire reign to lock down opium spread and production, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. In fact, during this period of time, another country is going to start trading opium in China as well. Who might this other country be? America. There are American companies that recognize how much money China is making by selling, I'm sorry, Britain is making by selling China opium. And America is going to start a partnership with several of its companies and poppy growers in Turkey. So Turkey was growing poppies for poppy seeds, which are, without the opium stuff, just kind of tasty to put into cooking, right? Turkey today is still one of the largest producers of poppies for food production stuff. I realize now that I should have shown you pictures of me in a poppy field in Turkey. If somebody wants to redeem an adventure hat, I'll show you some pictures of that. It's an interesting sight here that one of the companies that gets involved with poppy opium trade in China from America is a company owned and operated by a family called Delano. And you're like, where have I heard Delano before? And if you've heard of FDR, the D is Delano. So if you want to know maybe how FDR was in such a prime position to be in the big wheels and deals of American politics, maybe because it's the fact that his grandfather made millions of dollars off of selling opium to China. Oh boy. Yeah. Didn't think that we would be talking garbage about presidents tonight, did you? Oh boy. Okay, so we've got the opium poppies. Let me let me find my pictures. All right. Okay, so we will share some Adventure Hat emotes, and then I shall don the Adventure Hat. So, for those of you that do not know, this is the Adventure Hat. This is what I wear when I go on adventures because I don't tan, I just burn. So when I was in Turkey in 2022, a friend of mine and I were driving down the highway, and we really didn't have any idea what was going on. We just sort of look out the window, and there are these. Just all of these beautiful poppies. Again, these are not grown for opium. These are grown for the seeds to be used in, things like your poppy seed, bagels, etc. So, of course, we had to stop and take some pictures. Poppy protective equipment, right? So, this huge field of poppies, and it's just right off the side of the road. It's absolutely beautiful, and the scenery is amazing. For those of you that have never had the benefit of doing a lot of travel, right? But Turkey is a beautiful, beautiful place, and you can see how far these poppy fields stretch, because if we look back here in the distance, like all of these are poppies. This sort of hazy purple area, all of these are poppy fields, right? So we're like in the middle of the poppy field, and I get this idea that what we need to do is we need to take some like glamour shot kind of things, right? Where we're going to do something like, maybe a calendar shoot or something like that. So somewhere in here, I got out in the middle of the field and had my colleague Dan take a picture of, there we go. There we go. So there's me in a poppy field wearing the adventure hat. In the middle of the Turkish countryside. I love this stuff, man. And you have to have like the thoughtful gaze where something's happening just off the left of screen that you're looking at. And there's me pointing at something like, oh, look at the beauty of nature. So, anyway, is that drone armed? Sorry, I hit the wrong button there. So, there's the adventure of the poppy fields in Turkey. I love that stuff. This is the love of the adventure hat, right? You get to see goofy things like me in a poppy field pointing and making Hallmark cards, right? Nancy Reagan told me I could say no to drugs. You can say no to drugs. She didn't say whether or not you should. She just said that you can, right? Anyway, America gets involved in the trade as well. It's not nearly as much as the British, though. The Americans are also not as pushy and forceful as the British. I'm not trying to okay the fact that they were dealing opium. I'm just saying that it's not on the same level as the British stuff. Canton system is still in place, though, and the British can't just load up with opium and land on the docks and sell it directly to people. You can say no to drugs. Sounds like China had a hard time doing that. Let's not forget that opium is an addictive substance, and it's fair to point out again that the Chinese people had been aware of opium, and I'm not trying to take away the agency that they had when they chose to become, opium users, and they chose to smoke it for narcotic purposes, but I'm fairly certain that there were some people that were like, oh, hey, I've had opium tea before when I've had a headache. Let me just smoke some of this stuff. It won't be so bad. And then before they knew it, they were addicted. It's a very highly addictive substance, right? So what are we going to do? Well, the emperor at this time, and this is going to be an emperor that's fairly fateful and kind of like a big dog in the story, is this guy. This is Dao Guang. Dao Guang was on the throne from 1820 to 1850, and he is going to decide to try to take a different angle, and he is going to start threatening the trade heads and the governors of individual provinces. And he's going to start saying stuff like, look, the emperor puts you in the position to run trade in the Canton system or to run these individual provinces. And if you do not start curbing opium use in your province, and if you do not stop opium trade happening in your particular Canton system area, I'm going to remove you. Now, this is a little bit of a different angle because the individual governors and individual trade monopoly runners stood a substantial loss at this, right? They would not necessarily just lose their money, but they might also lose face. They might lose their position, and their family and their entire family's history might then be called into question. So this is a bit of a different angle, and it has a limited effect. Limited effect. It's not going to solve the problem. Sherlock Holmes was. I'm not sure. Oh, Sherlock Holmes was addicted to opium. Yeah. So what are we going to do? Well, our Emperor Dao Guang has enough, and he decides that he's going to basically appoint, we would in America today call it a czar. He's going to appoint this guy named Lin Zexue, and he's going to say, all right, Lin, you're my boy. This is Lin Zexue, and he's going to say, you need to go get rid of opium. Was it opium or cocaine? I'm pretty sure Sherlock Holmes used opium, but I'm not 100% certain. He may have also used cocaine. In the modern TV show, he uses nicotine patches. Anyway, Lin is going to get tasked with getting rid of opium. And he's going to take this very very seriously. So he gets positioned in 1839, and his goal is destroy the opium trade. And Lin is like, cool, let's do it. Let's destroy the opium trade. So first off, what are we going to do? First off, what we're going to do is we're going to round up everybody that we know that's addicted to opium, and we're going to destroy all of their paraphernalia. So we're going to break your opium pipes, and we're going to burn down your opium dens, and we're going to chase you back up the chain to try to find who's selling opium to you in the first place. And then we're going to confiscate all of their opium, and we're going to arrest merchants by the hundreds, somewhere between 500 and 600 different merchants, all in the Canton system, by the way, because they're all the ones dealing with the British, get arrested. Their entire holdings get stripped from them. The British merchants who come to shore to let people know that they have opium, that are going to sail back to their ships floating off of the coastline to sell opium, get threatened with violence. If you land on this dock again, I'm going to kill you. And eventually, over the course of like less than a year, did that drive up pipe sales? Probably. Just made them go further underground. This guy collected literal tons of cocaine. I'm sorry, not cocaine, opium. And in a really big ceremony, decided that he was going to just destroy all of it. So he mixed it up with salt and then threw it into the ocean. And they had this big bonfire where they burned a whole bunch of paraphernalia and a whole bunch of, trade stuff for that the people had been using to facilitate opium trade. And at that point, Dao Guang was like, hey man, you're doing great. You're doing great. This is amazing. I love it. The British get very upset. British merchants don't like being told no. The word bong made the pipe illegal. Interesting. Also, hey, a hydrocannabinoid. I don't think I said hello. Good to see you. Welcome in. So what do? Well, if we're the Boston Opium Party, what's up, Fall Machine? Similar, but it's more like the Canton Opium Party, where they threw all of it into the sea. Apparently, Lin Zexu felt pretty bad about that, and actually commissioned a sacrifice to apologize to the gods of the water for soiling their waters with the evils of this opium. Because he just felt bad about throwing it all into the ocean for the ocean's sake, not for the opium's sake. But all of these British merchants get really hacked off. And so they go back to England and they start complaining to Parliament. Oh, they're costing us all this money. Oh, they're not trading with us. They're not treating us like we're special. They don't like us very much. They threatened our bodily health, And here's what actually happens. Now, if you go back to look at what all of the British Parliament debates about, it's a lot of wibbly-wobbly parliamentary nonsense. This was what the British mercantile system wanted. They wanted an excuse to bring in the military. Why? Well, they were greedy little buggers. And they didn't like the fact that China didn't need them. They didn't like the fact that they were having to smuggle in opium. They didn't like the fact that they couldn't trade wherever they wanted to. They didn't like the fact that China was coming out ahead in all of their trade deals. They didn't like the fact that they just didn't get their way, right? They didn't appreciate being the smaller end of the trade deal. So the British government decides, okay, well, this was a seizure of British property. And because of this seizure of British property and these threats against our citizens, we are going to authorize a naval expedition to China in an attempt to reconcile our differences, and we're going to demand that the Chinese government come to terms with us and treat us like we are the British Empire and open up all of their ports to trade with us and stop these policies that hurt us. Basically, we're going to wave the flag and shoot them with a bunch of cannons. And this is actually what sets off the First Opium War. Reconciliation through fire, pretty much. So the First Opium War is 1842. Yeah, so, sorry, I realized that I got to stop doing the numbers on the keypad. I got to do the numbers up here. Britain demanding special treatment? Surely not. Yeah, pretty much. So in 1839, the British are going to send over a Navy flotilla. They're going to float up into the port of Canton, and they're going to blow up a whole bunch of Chinese ships. And we actually have a painting of this. Right? So this is the Battle of Canton Bay, where a relatively small number of British ships blow up a substantially larger number of Chinese ships. And there's a reason for this. Most notably, the British cannon were of superior design, and the British ships were of superior naval capability. Not saying anything bad about the Chinese ships. They were quite good. They were useful, very, very much used to trade. Had very deep drafts, could carry huge amounts of cargo, but they were not specifically sitting there with a Navy flotilla waiting for the British to return. Except for the fact that Lin had told everybody along the coastline, I don't think the British are happy about this. They're going to show back up with force. And everybody was like, oh, Lin, no way, bud. We've run them off. We've stuck it to them. We have shown the Chinese people that opium is bad. This is going to end everything. And Lin was like, no, it's not. They're going to be mad. And they showed up and they blew up a whole bunch of stuff. And he was like, see? The emperor doesn't respond very well to being told you so. And Lin Zexi is actually going to get blamed for the entire Opium War. And he gets stripped of his title and sent into exile. Which is kind of like, congratulations on a job well done. Go to exile. Did we mention that the Chinese invented gunpowder? That's true. Did they send him to Swindon? No, they sent him to a smaller city that's kind of out in the middle of territory that they didn't really care for very much. They wanted to move him pretty far away from the center of activity. Anyway, so sometimes it's better to be employed than to be right. That's true. So after the initial naval bombardment and the stuff in Canton, the British really wanted to go on land and start taking stuff along the coast, but they decided to wait until the next year, into 1840. Good gracious, 1140? What the devil am I talking about here? Oh, good gracious. Anyway, 1840. By that point, there had been an accumulation of foot soldiers from Bengal, from various other parts of India. They had sort of coordinated down at Singapore, and by the middle part of 1840, they're going to have a big naval flotilla that's guarding a whole bunch of troop ships. So they're going to have now Navy and land power, and they're basically going to start taking over whatever they want. They're going to focus initially on port cities along the coast, specifically cities that they would like to force China to trade through. And they're also going to start bringing out these new big fancy weapons, specifically this guy. Now this is an etching, but this is the HMS Nemesis, and it is a steam-powered ironclad warship. The Chinese didn't invent guns, though. They did, sort of. Not the kind of guns that the British were using at the time, but did they buy that from the U.S.? Technically, no. It had some U.S. stuff on it, but they had built that themselves. This is a big, scary ship. big old scary ship, because it doesn't go down, and it has lots of cannon on it, and you can see it coming. And the Chinese very quickly nicknamed this the Devil Ship. And pretty much wherever it shows up, the Chinese know that they have lost. The First Opium War isn't really very much of a war. It's much more of a controlled killing. The British win every engagement. Their military power was significantly superior to the Chinese. They attacked without particular regard to things like, civilians. Their goal here was to punish the Chinese as much as possible, to force them into signing treaties. And that ends up being what has to happen. Otherwise, the war would have pretty much dragged on forever. So the Chinese are going to sign Treaty of Nanjing in 1842. This is sometimes also referred to as Nanking. Same thing. But this is bad for China. This is really, really bad for China. First off, in the process of the war, the British had seized several sets of islands off the coast of China and had already begun to turn them into naval bases. And they demanded the cession of some of this territory as payment for war indemnities. So China at this point was forced to give up Hong Kong. And somebody mentioned Hong Kong earlier. This is how Hong Kong fell into the hands of the British. They demanded it in the Treaty of Nanjing. The Canton system that was so powerful for 140-something years is going to end up being pretty much scrapped. The government was no longer able to hold, the government of China was no longer able to hold trade monopolies under the treaty. And what that meant was the British were going to be able to sell whatever they wanted to whomever they wanted, except for opium. And we'll come back to that in just a second. There are going to be several other large cities that are port cities opened up for trade, and not just for British trade, but for any international trade. So this is for French or American or British. It doesn't matter who shows up. Anybody is going to be able to trade at these new cities. Also, it's free trade, which means that the government of China was no longer able to set up protections for Chinese merchants or for the Chinese economy. They were going to be expected to trade freely. And finally, Europeans were going to be able to purchase and set up land inside Chinese territory for things like warehouses, stockpiling stuff, factories, etc. None of these are going to be positions that are going to uniformly benefit Chinese trade. All of the stuff in the Treaty of Nanjing was designed specifically to benefit Europeans. Does the century of humiliation start at the beginning or the end of the First War? Lumpy, I'm not 100% sure if they count that at the beginning or at the end. That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. Is this the Nemesis itself? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, pretty cool stuff. Better question, does it have official dates? I don't even know that. Both great questions that I do not know the answers to. So, did it impact the silk trade? It did. When we have free trade and anybody that wants to can float up to any of these 5 ports and just trade whatever they wanted, however they wanted, Chinese goods are going to be traded in a much more rapid pace. The export amount of stuff is going to go up dramatically. But what that also means is it's going to start having a sort of negative effect on the price per item, because as more stuff gets traded out of China, the availability of it increases, so the demand for it is going to eventually decrease as it begins to saturate the market. So prices are going to have a fairly sharp drop. That's fairly quick, but then it sort of levels off as demand stabilizes. So trade deficit. Well, I mean, China was always going to be sending more goods out than it was bringing goods in. China didn't need European goods. China was only really interested in European money. That's going to start changing a little bit, because with the eradication of the government-controlled monopolies, there are going to be more Chinese mercantile class people competing for things within the market, and that's going to create a sort of a jolt in demand for things like European goods, because there are going to be more people inside of China that are going to be what we might call middle class. This isn't necessarily a middle class the way that we would understand it in the Western terms. These people didn't have the same amount of social rights or political rights, but when it came to money, if there's more competition, there are going to be more people sort of in the middle. Wikipedia says 1839 to 49, so that would be the beginning of the first Opium War. Cool. Thank you for clearing that up, Lumpy. I appreciate that. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so Treaty of Nanjing, uniformly bad for China. And they are not in a positive position from this. They're going to start losing a lot of stuff. They're going to end up on the kind of back end of a lot of these trade deals. And the interim period of time just makes it worse. All right, Prof, take it easy, man. Thanks for hanging out. Good to see you. Everybody that is looking for some gaming that is digging Dark Souls or Souls-ish type material, or just want to ask a question, go follow Prof, which is a bit of a logic joke, ha ha ha. He's a smart dude, knows a lot about sociology as well, but is usually playing some kind of game on stream and chatting. So go give him a follow and hang out. I'm sure he'll be on tonight. He streams lots of nights, maybe every night. I'm not 100% certain. But anyway, the interim period is not going to be good for China. There's a lot of negative stuff that happens. First off, once Britain gets special treatment, other countries are going to start demanding their own treaties with the Chinese government. And in 1844, France is going to get its own sort of special treaty, and America is going to get its own special treaty. These are both designed to give French and American trade a little bit of an edge. And one of the things that sort of precipitated these ideas was that, excuse me, the government was sort of afraid, right? Like, Daoguang was sort of freaked out that what would happen if France and America both decided to attack at the same time. They're both Western countries. They both have Western, material, war materials. Are they going to do the same thing that the British did? We were not in a position to repel the British. Are we going to be in any position to repel the Americans or the French? And was sort of worried that, they would have Opium War 2 and 3 right there. So they went ahead and signed these treaties under fear and duress, basically. And then stuff just starts getting really, really weird. The central government, the Qing dynasty, is going to lose a lot of support because of the outcome of the Opium War. It was seen as a weakness to treat these European powers equally. It was seen as a failure of leadership to have been surprised so badly and to have lost so badly. And it was seen as a bit of a sign that maybe the leadership wasn't in the best graces of the universe, right? So this is getting into some Confucian philosophy here with the mandate of heaven. If you're doing things the right way and things are going great, heaven is shining and smiling on you. When things get bad, maybe heaven is trying to show that you need to go. But anyway, in the midst of all of this stuff, the Qing emperors are going to have an increasingly difficult time trying to keep the peace in their country, especially along the border zones, because the military weakness that came out of the first Opium War is going to spread. Everybody's going to know that the military isn't as strong as it's supposed to have been, or isn't as strong as it looked. And this is going to encourage border issues. This is going to encourage other people to start testing their luck. But this is also going to bring about some really, really weird stuff. They probably would have done the same. They probably would have. You can have, yeah, exactly. What would the U.S. be receiving from China import-wise at this time? That's a great question, Tad. Silk, porcelain, tea, and labor. A lot of Chinese people were basically being sold into slavery to come to America and do stuff like work on railroads or work in mines. We don't like talking about the impressment of stuff like, Chinese immigrants in the West Coast, but it happened a lot. By this point, the need for cheap labor in America was growing rapidly, and while some of this was considered indentured servitude, a lot of this was pretty much human trafficking. So, let me catch back up. The knee-jerk communist reaction. Well, at this point, Chinese wasn't communist. It was just it was a command run by the imperial family. Andrew from Narsil, still such a great name. Such a great name. Every time I see it, it's just like, oh, bad karma. What's up, Uncle Bill? Good to see you, my friend. Karma is more of a Hindu thing. But in the American understanding of the concept of karma, yeah, for sure. Railroads, yeah. Ain't no Americans going to build railroads. Well, there were plenty of Americans that did. But the Americans that did were black or Irish or first generation American from places like Northern Europe, or people that were brought in from China. The OG Mountain Dragon. What up? That's a great name too. Welcome to chat. Good to see you. I just got here. What years or decades are we talking about? So the Treaty of Nanjing happened in 1842, and now we're sort of talking about the period of time between the First Opium War and the beginning of the Second Opium War. So we're looking at a period of time from about 1842 until about 1856. So an interim period of time of about 14 or so years, where things kind of get squirrely and bad for the, spoilers, get bad for the Chinese emperor again. You knew Chinese immigrants worked on that, but you didn't know it was under those circumstances. Yeah, a lot of it was. You saw Blazing Saddles, right? I know that, but not in the favor with heavens. Yeah. I'm with you, Uncle Bill. I'm with you. I'd have to do that thing, right? What's up, Cliff? Good to see you. Anyway, Emperor. We have a change of emperor, and we are going to get a new emperor who is this guy. This is Shanfeng. Shanfeng is a pretty powerful dude, and he's going to sort of try his best to hold on as much as he can, but. Shanfeng is going to rule during one of the most tumultuous periods of the Qing Empire. This guy takes the throne when he's fairly young. He's 19 when he takes over. And as soon as he takes over, he's going to have a whole bunch of problems drop right into his lap. First off, he's young. And because his family had already been sort of losing faith with a lot of the people, now we've got a young guy that's taking over. He doesn't have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. And Emperor Moby, I can see it. I can see it. I just love these paintings, though. Man, these are so great. Just the amount of detail. I mean, it's to be fair, like if you went to see this in person, this is basically a life-size portrait. So a lot of this detail makes more sense when you realize the whole painting is effectively the same size as a human. But man, just so cool. I love all that stuff, man. But I'm getting off into the weeds because I friggin' love art. Anyway, Shanfeng is going to take over, and almost immediately, he's going to have a big old problem that falls right into his lap. And we could do an entire stream specifically on this. And if you're interested, this would be a really good viewer request stream in the future. The Taiping Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion starts out because of this guy. This guy's name is Hong Xiquan. And he claims to be the brother of Jesus. Now, that is an interesting claim. I didn't know that Jesus had a brother from China, but that's the claim. And a little bit about Christianity in China at this point. It had been spread into China by Catholic missionaries, specifically by French Catholic missionaries. And this guy, Hong Xiquan, decides that he's going to declare himself the head of a heavenly kingdom and lead a rebellion. And the rebellion is big and bad and incredibly messed up. That is 100% correct. It is so incredibly messed up. It starts here in this really dark zone right here around Nanjing and Huangzhou. And it's going to start spreading out. And you can see that it's taking over a lot of the territory that is sort of the traditional Chinese heartland. And you can see here that at one point the rebels almost get to Beijing. But our Emperor Xiangfeng is going to have to spend a lot of time and a considerable amount of military effort in putting down this rebellion. And it takes decades to try to get rid of this. So why did people call him? Was it just that they were sick of things as they were and were wanting something different and new? Well, part of this is because things in China had been going worse for the average person. In an attempt at keeping power, the imperial line had done a lot of stuff that was heavy-handed. Christians had actually fallen under persecution under Xianfeng's father. And a lot of these early converts were afraid. The government ended up outlawing Christianity and to a certain extent, or specifically trying to outlaw things like the spread of Bibles and scripture or the spread of missionaries. people were not necessarily supposed to be traveling into the interior of China. Even during this time, the Europeans were not allowed to sort of go wherever they wanted to in China. They could only go into the port cities and only in certain parts of the port cities. So the fact that missionaries were getting into inner China was a problem for the Chinese government. So they cracked down on that a lot. And again, the emperor had lost a lot of face because of the humiliation of the First Opium War. That combined with ineffective responses, a dramatically shifting economy, heavy-handed responses to differences, and a young and untested ruler coming to the throne is sort of just a perfect storm of problems for rebellions to stir up. You two are the brother of Jesus. Listen to me, right? Bear in mind what they did to your brother, pretty much. We can't talk about all of the Taiping Rebellion because it's very long and drawn out and incredibly bloody. But somewhere between 20 and 30 million people die in the Taiping Rebellion. And in the process of this, the Europeans know that this is going on and actually encourage it. Because anybody rebelling against the emperor is going to weaken the imperial position, which is going to strengthen the European position. So they're going to egg on a rebellion that is going to lead to the deaths of maybe 25 million people. Way to go. Also, let's be very clear here. Britain is still very upset because the Treaty of Nanjing did not allow them to sell opium directly to Chinese people. They were still having to do opium deals in floating barges off the coast. And they had figured out a new way around that. And the way around that, million. 20 to 30 million. And we don't really know how many people it killed because a lot of them were peasants who didn't really have, government paperwork. They weren't really on the rolls. They weren't really counted in the census because in a lot of places, especially in some of the more rural areas, peasants were still considered property. So they didn't get, tally marks. But it's somewhere between 20 and 30 million. Yeah, that's more than World War I. Right? And I laugh not because it's funny, but because it's forgotten. And it sucks. It should have been mentioned in school. This is why I do what I do, right? Because this is filling in the blanks of stuff that should be taught. Anyway, the way that the British are going to figure out another loophole to increase opium getting into China is the use of something called coolie labor. So what is coolie labor? So here's how it goes. We can't sell people in China opium directly. Coolie with a strike. Correct. There were a lot of poor people in China and a lot of peasants. And after the Treaty of Nanjing, European companies could build factories and could build warehouses and storage facilities on Chinese property. So here's what you do. You build one of these big warehouses. And instead of bringing European people all the way over to China to work in this, you hire poor Chinese peasants to work in your warehouse. And you don't trade opium with them. You pay them in opium. So at that point, they could take opium into the market and they could exchange that for other goods like food. So this is yet another loophole. And China had figured this loophole out and was trying to cut down on coolie labor. Britain wanted to expand coolie labor because this was a way for them to pump more opium into the Chinese market. And of course, at this point, they were basically making opium slaves. What's up, Evo? Good to see you. Like from Full House. That's Coulier, and he's French. So Dave Coulier played Uncle Joey, but I got that reference. He's Canadian. Coolio, R.I.P. Coolio, not Coolio. This is somewhat like Gangster's Paradise because there was a lot of illegal activity going on, and the only people making money off of it were the criminals. So there you go. Anyway, the situation was deteriorating. Britain still wanted to trade opium directly. And as France and America increased their relationship with China and Russia enters the picture as another player wanting to trade with China, Britain starts feeling a little bit like they're not being treated special enough. Because in the Treaty of Nanjing, they had included a statement that China had to declare Britain to be the most favored nation. So what that meant was, theoretically speaking, any treaty that China made with other countries could not be as good as the treaty that they had made with Britain. But here are all these other countries now that are doing deals with China. So Britain demands a renegotiation of the Treaty of Nanjing, to which the imperial government says, shove off, no, we're tired of your junk. And this is going to put Britain at odds again. They're very upset now. How dare you not treat us like we're British? Dadgummit. We're the British Empire. You're not treating us like the British Empire. And China's like, I don't like you. You're not supposed to be here in the first place. You're flooding opium into my country. It's against the law to do that. You're literally breaking my laws. Go away. And Britain's like, we're the British Empire. We don't go away. We get our way. So what do? Well, the British basically start looking for excuses. And they're going to try to find whatever they can to start something else. Of course, your most favorite. You came and blew up our ships, right? The insolence. What up, Viper? Good to see you, man. I've been giving the British the old 1-2 pretty much all stream because this is some of the most naked ambition that the British Empire ever did in China, and should be called out as the atrocity that it was. Lopta, I have nothing against you as an individual. You aren't even born. So I will give it to America when it's time to give it to America. I will give it to France when it's time to give it to France. I don't really hold punches. I will do the old what's the old saying that sunlight is the best disinfectant. I'll sunlight everybody, right? Not especially proud of our imperial past. Hey, America had an imperial past too, and I'm not super proud of what we did. We did horrible, horrible things, right? You know, we've committed multiple genocides. We have taken over multiple sovereign territories. We have, a history of almost 200 years of, well, I guess if we do the math, going all the way back to the colonial period, about 240 years of institutionalized slavery, and then another 100 years of institutionalized segregation. We ain't perfect. We'll call it what it is. Human beings make governments, and governments are made up of humans. If humans can screw stuff up, that means governments can screw stuff up, right? Just saying. Or our messed up president. You're not about to re-elect Donald Trump like we are this year, so we can get into it for America too. Trust me. Unless you're literally the head of state or in a voting member of the ruling party right now, of a big country, you probably don't have very much liability when it comes to what's going on in your country right now. Stick with me here. What if we injected UV light into our veins to cure COVID? That was a suggestion. If we could just figure out how to make that work. You don't even get to vote anymore, so you have no influence over anything. Oh no, are you in one of the areas that isn't being allowed? Are you by any? I don't want to ask you where you are, but I know that there are parts of the current British world that are part of the UK that have effectively been denied their own right to vote on stuff. So, if you are in that position, I feel you. You've been overseas for more than 10 years. Ah, yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. I feel you. Before the end of the stream, we'll say something about COVID, but for now, you don't want to derail further. That's okay. You can, if you want to. Okay, so back to the story. Britain starts looking for a way to cause trouble, and they find it with something called the Arrow incident. So what is the Arrow incident? All right. Bureaucratic nonsense. Blah, 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 blah. You've got to have a license to trade. If you are British and you're going to be trading under the British crown, you've got to have a license. The Chinese were legitimately and legally allowed to check your license. If you were not sailing under a license, they were allowed to arrest you, confiscate your goods, and charge you with piracy, because this was literally smuggling if you weren't following the rules. Now, there was a ship that was called the Arrow. The captain of the ship at one time had been licensed by the British. However, his license had expired. But he was still flying the British flag. And he was doing this under the full awareness that he was no longer actively operating under the British rules of trade. So the Chinese government hears about a ship that's falsely sailing under British colors with a captain that's not licensed, that's still trying to do business. So this is piracy, right? Now, the ship sails into harbor. Chinese ships intercept it. They go out onto the ship. They try to check the paperwork for the ship. Of course, the paperwork doesn't exist. So they lower the British flag. They impound the ship. And they put all of the crew in prison. Here's the kicker. Another British ship that was floating around the area sees this. And they hightail it back. And they get word all the way back over to Britain. China is capturing our ships. And they are stealing our goods. And they are imprisoning our people. Now, it doesn't matter that the dude literally had no license and was sort of, falsely flying the British flag to try to get under this. That doesn't matter. This is what the British want. They want some sort of, excuse because they were ticked that they weren't getting their way. And so they send this really nasty letter to the emperor and they say, you must release our citizens, you must release our goods and return our ship, you're stealing international blah 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 blah. And the response from the Chinese is accurate. Hey, look, your dude wasn't sailing the right way, didn't have a license, we're completely in the right here. Here's what we'll do. We will release the crew members, but the command, the three people that were in the command of the ship, so the captain and the first mate and the quartermaster, we're going to keep them and we're going to charge them with piracy. And that's when things go crazy because the British Parliament's like, they're stealing our ships, they're impressing our people, blah, 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 blah. And Britain goes, okay, we're going to go fight again. And so they literally send around a memo. And Britain goes, hey, America, we're going to go fight the Chinese. Would you like to join our fight? And America's like, not really. And they go, okay, cool. Hey, Russia, we're going to go fight the Chinese again. Do you want to be in on this? And Russia's like, "Niet." And they go, "Hey, France, do you want to be in on this?" And France like, "Oh, well, we don't know if we really have a reason to fight with China. They haven't really done anything to us." And Britain's like, "Look, dude, is there anything that you can think of? Like, anything that you can think of?" And France is like, "I mean, we'd really like to get more money, and we'd really like to take over more territory. What can we see? Let's look." So France starts digging through basically every report that they have coming out of China, and they find one. So this French missionary, who had been allowed into one of the cities that was designated for international trade, had decided, "I'm going to leave where I'm supposed to be, and I'm going to go up into the backwoods of China to spread Christianity." This was illegal. He was indirectly involved with some of the stuff that happened in the Taiping Rebellion. And he had been killed by some Chinese people for effectively trying to fan flames of Christian missionary work / rebellion. And so France goes, "Hey, they killed one of our missionaries. Is that okay?" And Britain was like, "Dude, they insulted God. They insulted your country. Perfect reason to go to war. Come on." So Britain and France decide it's time to go back to war. And this is the Second Opium War. This is 1856 to 1860. Let me catch back up with chat. It was proposed. What's up, Moose? It was a proposal to study by UCLA to stick UV lights into people's lungs to kill COVID. They'd already been trying it for a few months. Interesting. I had not seen reference to that. It's the kind of stuff that'll start a war. Yeah, it was. So Brits told France, "Make a wish, we'll be your genie." Pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, it makes a change from England and France fighting each other, right? Fighting each other, sure. Now we're fighting the Chinese because we want to sell more opium and stuff, right? Okay, so France gets in and we have ourselves a war. China is in a worse position at the beginning of the Second Opium War than they were in at the beginning of the First Opium War. The Chinese just get steamrolled. It's 3.5 years of every fortified position in China falling to European combined forces. It's not close. They don't really even have any sort of moments where it looks like they might win. It's just steamrolling. And the European forces get all the way to Beijing. They run the emperor out of the capital, and then they burn down the palaces of the emperor in Beijing. And by the time we get to 1860, I mean, the Chinese have to come to the table again, at this point basically begging for terms. Like, look, we obviously can't fight you. We're not going to be in the position to continue to throw our soldiers into cannon fire. What are your terms? And oh boy, are the terms bad. As soon as Britain and France get the Chinese emperor to the table, Russia and America both sort of skitter up and go, "Hey, if we're going to have ourselves some dealings with the Chinese government, we'd like to get on it now." So we've got basically 5-level talks. We've got China, and they're going to be making deals with the US, Russia, France, and Britain. One of the things that they get is embassies in Beijing. The Chinese government has to give territory inside the capital city to these 4 countries so that they can set up embassies and guarantee these embassies direct contact with the imperial structure. Basically, when we want to talk to you, you have to let us talk to you. Europeans, and Westerners, so basically Europeans and Americans, are going to get freedom of travel anywhere they want to inside China. It doesn't matter if it's just the port cities. They can go anywhere they want to, whenever they want to, as long as they are following the prescribed rules of travel. But this is going to open up trade inside. This is also going to start letting the British and the French especially move goods deeper into the country. China is going to have to sign letters of tolerance for all religions. They are going to basically have to agree to ban religious persecution of all sorts. They're going to have to open up a ton of new port cities for trade. Basically, all of the large cities all the way down the Chinese coastline at this point are going to be forced into centers of trade. They're going to have to pay huge indemnities, just literal tons and tons and tons of silver. This is going to help replenish some of the European trade coffers that had been going low for about 100 years at this point. And the kicker, opium has to be made legal. And China has to allow direct trade from Europeans to Chinese for opium. And this is the floodgate. This is it. This is like the point where things just hit the accelerator. Let me show you this chart. All right, so this is opium imports into China from 1650 to 1880. And again, we're using here a chest, which is again, 140 pounds or 64 kilograms. And you can see where we are, 1650, 1775. This is when the government starts trying to take action against opium importation. This is about the time that the Europeans start figuring out floating barges, and you can see how floating barges off the coastline are going to be able to increase pretty dramatically. And then it's just sort of an exponential growth curve from there. By the time we get to 1860, which is right here, right? Actually right here, you can see the gap between, so this is at the beginning of the first Opium War. This is after the second Opium War, where trade has gone up about what is that, 45% probably? Kind of crazy stuff, right? I wonder where we considered perhaps just leaving the Chinese alone. No, that was never a consideration. No. China had money and a market, and the British wanted it, and that was the consideration. The British felt entitled to trade, and if China was going to stop that, the British weren't going to let them stop it. Do you think things would have been as bad if they just handed over the prisoners? In this small instance, sure. But would Britain have kept looking for any possible cause to go to war? 100%. If it wasn't this thing with the arrow, it would have been another thing with another thing. They wanted to go to war. They wanted to punish China. They wanted to open things up. They were looking for a reason to go. Yes, something would have triggered it eventually. Exactly. They would have found some other pretext to go to war. 100%. 100%. So there's that. And does China benefit from this trade as well, or is all the trade pretty much one-sided? And what about the common folk? Did they get any improvement in their life? Fair question. So China was pretty much getting opium, which was degrading their society, which was causing trouble, which was creating addicts. Again, China didn't necessarily need European goods to be self-sufficient. They didn't really need European items. They didn't really need food. If anything, they would have benefited from stuff like military technology, but the British and the French weren't going to trade a force that was in opposition to them military goods. So they weren't going to be able to strengthen their infrastructure that way. there was some technology that was brought over, stuff like photographs, the early use of things like Morse code and telegraph systems were brought over. But that was mostly going to be constrained to cities along the coastline where trade was legal. The average Chinese peasant wasn't really being benefited very much from this. If you were a peasant laborer in one of the big cities, you might be in a slightly better position because you were being paid with opium that you could then sell for other goods. But there's a fairly decent chance that when they gave you opium, you were using some of that for personal consumption, which of course would then have ended up getting you addicted to opium, right? Henry Fox Talbot, yeah, pretty much. So the average person in China did not benefit from this. The average person in China ended up suffering from this because the degradation of the central government was going to allow for much more rebellion, which is going to end up causing significant amount of death. Stuff like the Taiping Rebellion. There were others. Conscription to the Imperial Chinese Army to fight things like the Taipei Rebellion are going to result in deaths. There was another war with the Sikhs in India. There were other rebellions along the border with territories that were trying to break away. It was there's not really any notable pointed benefit to this to China, except for if you want to look at this in sort of a teleological viewpoint, this led them to opening trade with the rest of the world, which today put them in a position to be a superpower. But I don't like making big teleological arguments like that because it just doesn't hold up. That was me attempting to try to find some angle for it, and I don't think that's a good angle. I would not argue that particular point. Yeah, it's too big of a leap, and I agree. But I was trying to make some argument for the sake of trying to make an argument, even if that point was then to just say this is the only way that it would work, and that obviously doesn't work. So, all right, so that's the Opium Wars. And that is all of the material that I particularly had. I forgot to mention Lin Zexu. So he got exiled, and when the Second Opium War was starting back up, they called him out of exile, and his image started to become sort of an anti-opium rallying cry. And he ended up sort of getting a little bit of reconciliation by the end of his life, getting to sort of work on anti-opium stuff after coming out of exile for a little bit. I forgot to update everybody on Lin's issue. But yeah, that's our story. So Opium Wars, European overreach, imperialism at its worst, lots of people dead, lots of people addicted, and playing into the end of the Qing dynasty, which in the early 1900s is going to utterly collapse and lead to the civil war that puts the communists in charge. So that is not too big of a leap to make. Had the Opium Wars not happened, the Qing dynasty might very well have survived through the late 1800s and early 1900 troubles. So not a happy time. No, not really. Not really. It was great for the capitalists. That's true. All right. So that's all for me. So anybody else have any questions about this stuff? You didn't know the story? Thank you for enlightening me. That's what we're here for. This is the purpose of the stream. So fills in the blanks, lets you know what's going on, helps put things into perspective, and we'll do the standard question book. Yeah. All right. Here's the standard question book. Ba-ba-da-bum. It is an antique book full of questions that I don't have the answers to unless I know them in my head. Let's get something up here at the beginning, like a really early question. So what we do, we just sort of randomly open the book to a page like this. and then I point to something like this, and then I read it. What was the Roman Forum? Well, that's a great question. The Roman Forum was a big old square in the middle of the city that was used for various civic functions. For example, buying and selling days, market days, voting, public speaking, and all sorts of ceremonial purposes like big funerals, etc. So what was the Roman Forum? That was an easy one. If I were Chinese knowing this history, I would view the West a bit suspiciously. That's a fair point. That is a fair point to make. It's also fair to point out, again, and I mentioned this, Frank, at the very beginning of the stream. I'm not sure if you were with us at that point. But this particular period of time gets used by the current Chinese government extensively as anti-West propaganda, which it's not hard to see how that works, right? Note about COVID. Mentioned previously that they were researching whether having COVID weakened your immune system afterwards. Mounting evidence is yes, it reduces the function of CD8 T cells, which is a similar thing to HIV targeting CDT4 cells. So things aren't looking good. Oh, that sucks. Is that with all variants, or was that sort of like with COVID Alpha or Delta or something like that? Considering this is recent history, is China as vulnerable today to Western powers as it was then? Or do we have completely different conditions nowadays? China is not as powerful as it looks. China is substantially weaker than it looks. But China has nuclear weapons and a very advanced modern army now. Britain would get its taint handed to it if it tried to do this to China today. Is that where Change My Mind fellow sat? Yeah, if there was an ancient Change My Mind guy in the Roman world, he would have sat in the forum with his little table that said Change My Mind. Mutate me mentis. You change my mind. Is that right? No, it'd be, yeah, that's right, because it's imperative tense. Yeah, okay. Ceremonial purposes. It was a popular website in the 90s for sharing... yeah, exactly. The forum. Getting the vaccine seemed to reduce the COVID effect that's in your immune system for whatever that's worth. It had to be filled out in triplicate with a pink copy for the customers and the yellow copy for the government. There we go. Definitely vulnerable. Differently vulnerable. Yeah, differently vulnerable. Words. Differently vulnerable. That's an odd phrase to try to say. The opinion hat has been summoned. So I'll put on the opinion hat, and we can share some opinion emotes. If the Brits wanted an excuse this bad, is there anything that China could have done to avoid it? Huh. Yes, but it would have had to have been done early. If the first British ships that had sailed up in the 1680s had been blown out of the water and every single one of them killed and nobody returned with the story, and that happened 7 or 8 times, I think the British would have probably buggered off in the early 1700s. But by the time we get to the 1800s, nah. I don't think that there was anything that the Chinese could have done to make that change. I think that the British and the French just wanted it, and they were going to take it one way or the other. So I don't think that there's any point in that narrative where the industrial military power of Britain would not have eventually gotten its way. I don't think that there was anything that China could have done. Even if China had opened everything up and China had immediately started trading as soon as Britain got ticky about it, I think all Britain would have done is moved in faster and done the same thing to China that it did to India, and they would have ended up holding a big chunk of the Chinese mainland. Very similar to what happened in India. They would have found some sort of way to casus belli their way into a fight in the mainland. At least I think so. Currently, I only have 2 hats ready. The adventure hat and the opinion hat. I am looking at purchasing another hat. As soon as I get a little bit more funding together, I am going to purchase a Gandalf-esque hat that will be predict the future. So the future hat, and it'll look like a Gandalf hat from Lord of the Rings. So we're all vulnerable in Taiwan. Yeah, Taiwan right now is scary, right? I do not know if they know which variants, but you presume this is universal. Okay. There's always something to be done differently. Yeah, it would have been pretty tough. I don't know if anybody would have figured this one out. Has anyone considered maybe letting China get its vengeance on Great Britain? Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah, I'm feeling significantly better. We're thrown. Or is it Wert? No, it'd be We're thrown. Yeah, what's up, man? Or I say man, broadly speaking. What's up, my friend? Welcome in. What if China just sold itself to China? Pretty much what America does when we need money. We just go into debt against ourselves, right? What the Federation should have done at Klingons at first contact. Pretty much, right? Just photon torpedoes at max, right? Stop producing nice things, right? Exactly, Tad. Just like, why not make ugly things? Wonder how many Union Jack t-shirts are made today in China. Probably a lot. I need a Fez. Fez of the future. I liked the idea of a Gandalf hat. Fez of the future does have a nice alliteration to it. Maybe we'll put up a vote in Discord. So if you're not already in the Discord and you would like to be involved in the debate over what the future hat should be, maybe we can have a vote in Discord. What up, fellow human? Right, exactly. See, the Palantirs didn't tell the future. They just showed what was. And Gandalf really couldn't predict the future. He just knew the history and knew the way that people acted and could use that information to hypothesize the future. He wasn't completely aware of the future. So this is why I was trying to go with Gandalf, because he's not really predicting the future. He's just using existing data to predict the next step. Trump will be president and we will all suffer. Unfortunate, but probably true. Man, right. Can we trade England for Taiwan? I don't think that would be a rough trade. I don't do followage. I guess I could, but it's not really something that I've heard a lot of people ask about too much. You've been following since November of 2022, though. Those Hong Kong treaties, historical documents, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, pretty much. Exactly, Paradox. Exactly. Who doesn't have nukes, though? You don't Discord. Lopta, you can record your vote here, and I will record it for you. How about that? Gandalf hat is in character for the channel. That's also true, right? Is China more or less modernized than Russia? More. Well, more in the cities. The rural parts of Russia and the rural parts of China are just as equally not modernized. You mean just like me? I don't know what that's in relation to. I've lost my antecedent for that. I'm pretty far behind in chat. The British would have had its way with China, probably. The only parallel you can think of is where the gave up on contact, and the nation is a small island. Don't remember where. Native people were able to fend off every attempt to contact. Eventually, powers gave up trying to do so. I think that's the Sentinel Island off the coast of India. I think it's North Sentinel Island. Just going to Google that real quick. Yeah, North Sentinel Island. We can go to that here on... It's off the coast of India. Nope, that's... Is that it? Well, I thought it was off the coast of India. Yeah, but that's it. It's this island right here. Nobody goes there because the natives will kill you. I think it's under control of India. Or under the control of the Indian government. But it's illegal to go there. Like, it's a protected territory. And I don't think that you can land there by law. Yeah, it's under the control of India. I've got it on the Google. Yes. Do you think he's going to be barred from office? No. Going to be the next president? Yes. China has better semiconductors than Russia? Yes. All right. Now I'm doing Tradle and Worldle. Oh, God. We're going to be on trade. The stream is turning long. Then that's okay. That's fine. Let's do Tradle. All right. Which country exports these products? Total $1 billion. $1 billion in trade. They export water. Interesting. Fuel wood. Refined petroleum. Processed fish. Gold. Huh. Frozen fish. Fuel wood. By the way, I'm purposely not looking at your chat right now because I'm trying to figure this out on my own, and I'll look at chat after I've made my first guess. Gold. A little bit of silver. Imitation jewelry products. Paper. Refined petroleum. So this is a kicker. It's got a refined petroleum, but it's not a lot. Water export, though, is kind of crazy. I'm going to guess Laos. And the reason is that it exports water to China, and that's so far away. Okay, so it's going to be another one of these countries that's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and this is going to take forever again. Yeah, it's going to be some little island in the Pacific, because that direction from Laos is South Pacific Island. Let's pick Nauru because it's in the news recently for abandoning Taiwan as a trade partner. But we're going to go further south into the... and see, like, at this point, I'm literally just guessing based purely on the directional material right here. Like, this right here, that's the basis of the guess now. Like, what's further south than that? Okay, so we got to kick back this way. Not many Pacific islands have $1 billion, though. Well, I mean, it is what it is. It's south and west of American Samoa. Vanuatu? No, it's west of Vanuatu. At least I was in the right direction. I came back too far the other way, though. Yeah, these little middle of nowhere islands in the Pacific are just they're almost impossible to guess. Fiji? That's probably it, right? Yeah, look at you. Look at you, Noger. You got it. I guess that should have been an easy pick, though. But I don't drink bottled water, so that's, you know. There we go. All right. So here we go. Worldle. I think this is Ecuador. Nope. A 1,000 kilometers north and... Oh, is it Nicaragua? No, it's not Nicaragua. Is it Nicaragua? Let's try Nicaragua. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Well, I mean, let me show you. I mean, Ecuador is that same sort of triangle, sort of, you know, but it's not tilted as far as Nicaragua's triangle is tilted, right? But, I mean, I was close. Oops. Web. Alright, let's play the bonus rounds. What countries does it border? Honduras. Panama. Is that not Panama? What the devil is that? Oh, is it Costa Rica? Sorry. This is Managua. Guess the flag. This is... No. It's got that light blue. No, it doesn't have the light blue in it. Okay. I thought it did. Is it this one? Okay. No, it had blue in it. I thought it was this one, but I guess that's not correct. Well, I mean, Honduras and Guatemala, they're right there by it. Population, 3 to 5 million. No, I'm so bad at this. Currency, that's a great question. Is it Cordoba? Because it's, hey, Spanish, right? Populated cities. Well, Managua's got to be first, and Leon's got to be second. And then I think Masaya, and then Titibaba. Yep. All right, we're going to guess the final round. How big is this guy? I'm so horrible at this. It's not too terribly big. I'm going to guess this. And I'm wrong again. Whatever. I'm so bad at the size and the... Ugh. Alright. Goodness gracious, I've got a lot of stuff to catch up with in chat. Gandalf knowing the history, allowing him to see the future. Yes. Main point was the sidetrack was the fact that The only reason why the island was not overrun is because it had very little resources. True. What if the U.S. bought more than just Alaska? Russia didn't want to sell more than just Alaska. Why Trump over Biden? I mean, why is Trump going to win over Biden? Because Biden is a really bad messenger for what he's doing that's actually good. And Trump is a really good communicator for the inaccurate things that he's selling. Yeah, everybody can guess on that stuff. U.S. selling water, yeah, for sure. 1 billion isn't too small. Yeah, so it's not like super big, but it's not like super small. No uranium in Fiji, apparently. What does it mean for China to possess nuclear weapons when it can't deter the West from injecting power into its backyard, meaning Taiwan? It means plenty. It means that if it wanted to, China could just nuke Taiwan and tell everybody in the West to, middle finger off. The only thing I would ever know about geography. There we go. I think it's a country. I didn't realize that Fiji water was from Fiji. Neither did I. Yeah, it's shipped from the other side of the world. What's in the news? There's a lot of stuff. Did Managua make opium for Britain? Not that I'm aware of. What's up, David? How's it going? Teach at college. We ever do a stream on the Reconquista? We are covering the Reconquista in pieces. We're already talking about some of that stuff last time around when we were in Spain. Talking about smaller Christian kingdoms up in the north, Galicia, Leon, stuff like that, slowly taking land away from the Emirate of Cordoba. And we'll continue to cover that over the course of time. If we're allowed to ask, I'm not sure what that was. Yeah, you can always ask. It came from Bengal. Bengal and India. That's where most of the opium was coming from. Always allowed to ask questions. Always, always, always. That's what we're here for. All right, did I get everything? Yes, I got everything. All right. You got to hear about the time the Nemesis was posted. Gotcha. Yeah. England conquered Bengal in 1757, and there was already an opium production facility, market, whatever. The Bengali people were already producing opium, and Britain sort of saw the benefit in expanding that, and when they took over Bengal, just sort of turned that into hyper product. They just they pumped money into it and pumped out opium really, really fast. One thing I realized was that there are stupid questions, but most people can't tell the difference between stupid and non-stupid ones, so it's always better to ask. Yeah, for sure. And I don't normally say, hey, that was a stupid question. I usually try to take questions at face value. This sometimes means that I miss the sarcasm or miss the joke, but, you can't always take everything silly, because then some people might be asking a legitimate question and then you treat that silly and it makes them feel uncomfortable. And, the goal here is to promote more talking, and by doing so, hopefully get more information out there. And, making people feel uncomfortable is not the way to do that. So I usually will just try to take everything at face value. All right, let's see who is around, because I think it's about time for us to do a raid. Who is streaming? Lots of people streaming. Oh, here we go. We are going to go raid. Well, let me catch up. There are no stupid questions, only stupid aphorisms. See what you did there. An earnest and straightforward answer is an excellent response to a snarky question. Yeah, absolutely. What's up, Noble Crumpet? Good to see you. Yeah, we're gonna go raid Cat Wizard TV, and I love these people. This is Talk to the Twizzard and Eris the Cat Goddess, and they have this really innovative stream where they play a D&D like game with people on the phone. They call it Dungeon Discordia, and the Twizzard is a modern day wizard. That reminds me a lot of a character from Dazed and Confused. And Eris the Cat Goddess is a very cute sidekick / co-host, and they host Dungeon Discordia where people call in and they play a D&D typed game that is procedurally generated, and it's really funny and it's fun to watch. So we're going to go raid Talk to the Twizzard. Let me throw up the thank you screen. Thank you to everybody who hangs out, who follows, who subscribes, and also, because they don't get recognition, thank you to the people that have become patrons on Patreon and have donated books via the book list. If you are so interested, there are the links, and you can do so if you want, but don't feel bad. But until next time, which is Thursday, I will see everybody around.